כמה מילים לגבי עצמי. אני מרצה באקדמית תל-אביב-יפו ובאוניברסיטת תל אביב, בעבר הרבה שנים בהייטק, בין השאר בתור התוכניתן הראשי בחברת קומברס, והיום בין השאר מייעץ גם בחברות בתעשייה, מעביר הדרכות בנושאים מגוונים. אנחנו הולכים לדבר על ריבוי שפות. למה צריך כל כך הרבה שפות? מה אפשר לעשות עם כל השפות האלו? ואיך בוחרים את השפה הנכונה? כשבעצם הבחירה תלוית שימוש, די ברור שהבחירה היא לא גנרית. אני ארצה להתחיל עם איזשהו סקר קצר. אז אם תוכלו בבקשה לקחת את ה-QR, לצלם את ה-QR, להיכנס לסקר, ואנחנו נעקוב אחרי התשובות שלכם בהמשך. אז בואו ניקח 2 דקות.
Amir, can you hear me?
Okay.
We have a few English speakers, so if we can switch to English.
Yeah, we'll switch to English. That's fine.
Thank you.
So there is a QR code on your screen. We'll give it another minute. So if you can just take the QR and open the survey. It's a very short survey just to see which languages are you using now, which languages you consider using. So we'll give it another minute and we'll see your answers at the end. Okay, I think we can move on. I can see your answers now, but I will share it with you later on towards the end of this session. So why are there so many languages? What can we do with all of those? And the answer, I think, is the same as why we have so many open sources in many cases which do the same thing. People like inventing things. People prefer in many cases to bring something new. So if something is not optimal, is not what they look for, there are certain possibilities, and one of the possibilities is let's invent a new language. And in a way, it's quite similar to speaking languages. We may use maybe only one language, but we have more than one. We have probably a few thousands or something like that. So we have many software or many programming languages, and probably we would not use all of them. So we need to pick. And with software languages, it's a bit different than speaking languages because there is some kind of relevancy to the domain. So it might be that there is a need for more than one language, but eventually we do not need to speak more than a dozen So let's pick our dozen, or let's pick our software languages of our choice. So the answer, should we use them all? No, we should not. We should pick the right one. When we come to choose one or choose a few, it is important to note that even when we choose one, we are not choosing a certain technology, because any software language, any environment brings with it an entire ecosystem. And the ecosystem itself has choices by itself. So even if we have picked the software language that we want to work with, then we have to pick the right tool chain, and in some cases we have more than one. And the other tools that we want to work with, the frameworks, the libraries, etc. So even after we pick a language, we still have choices to make, and the way to make choices would be in a way the same as picking a language. We have to understand the pros and cons. We have to understand what is better with a certain choice comparing to another. One of the things which is important when picking a certain technology is to understand who is using it. Is it popular? And there is a reason for picking something that is popular, because being popular means that you will have more programmers. You can just come and work with this programming language. So the learning curve would be less steep. You can just call up and get candidates who write, who implement, who know how to work with this language. You will have tools. You will have frameworks and libraries. And there are many indexes that try to capture which are the most popular programming languages. I'm listing a few in this slide, and in the following slides I will just take a look at some of these indexes. So, for example, there is a popularity of programming language index, and quite recently, this month, the ranking is Python the first, and then Java, JavaScript, C#, PHP, C++, and C, which are listed together in this index, are still alive and kicking. And the table goes on to Kotlin and Go, and Rust is there, and we'll discuss those as well. Now, how can they measure the popularity? What are the tools or the things that you should put inside when measuring popularity? So one thing that can be done is discussion in Stack Overflow or trends in Google. Now, trends in Google is a bit confusing or might be misleading, because if you start looking for each name in the list, I guess Go is a name. Go is quite a popular name or a key or a term to look for. Python is not only a language, there is a snake. Java, there is an island. So what people do, they look for the same name with the additional name tutorial. So they're looking for trends, which this is one thing in this index. It's not just the name of the language, but the thing is, trying to catch popularity is not something which is easy. This is one listing, and other listing would put, for example, JavaScript first. Stack Overflow even puts HTML and CSS in the same listing, and SQL. And then Python in this graph comes fourth, and Java apparently comes fifth. But you will see that the main languages, or if you are interested in which are the languages in the top 10 or top 20, you will probably get the same list. The exact ordering would be different between different indexes. JetBrains the company who bring IntelliJ and PyCharm and CLion, also has its own index. They are, in this case, managing a survey. I think this survey conducted, they have, let's take a look at it. Do you see the Jetbrain survey now? I think that I switched to another tab, which I think you see the new tab, right? You can answer in the chat if you see the new tab. No, you're not seeing the new tab, so let's take a look how I do that. It should be easy. I think that now you see the two tabs, right? And in this case, the State Developer Ecosystem 2020. And they have feedback from 19,000 developers, which is a big survey. And you can see here what I just put in the slides. I will be back in the slides in a moment. But they're asking quite similar questions. Well, I copied the questions from them. What are you using now, and which languages you consider using? Now, the gray squares are the languages or the amount, the percentage of people who are thinking of using something, and people who are using it is the orange percentage, orange squares. So JavaScript is the first, and they also have HTML and CSS and SQL, etc. And then you can see from the square brackets that Go and Kotlin and Dart and Python, and I think Rust as well, is something that people consider. These languages are languages that people consider in exploring and investigating. And we'll ask why. I'm back to the slide, so if you could just let me know in the chat if you see, yes, you see the slides. Okay. Did you hear about the There Is No Silver Bullet paper by Fred Brooks? Well, in 1986, Fred Brooks wrote a paper saying that he foresees that in a decade from the paper, and we are about 3 decades from there, from then, there will not be any substantial change in software programming, so no tenfold or even doublefold change in efficiency in writing programs. No invention that will bring the implementation of programs be much more efficient than what it was in 1986. And he explained in the paper the reason. And the reason is that when you write code, there is essence and accident. Accident is what he claims as being part of the language or the system or things which may create bugs but are not business logic bugs, as things that relate to the technology. And essence is the actual essence of your program, is the business logic. And what he claims is the business logic is the more complicated part. So even if you bring some new technology, like a new language, a new paradigm, it will not change things. Now, this picture is taken from Uppsala 2007, where Fred Brooks is the person in the middle, came and talked about this paper. The man in the wolf costume is Martin Fowler. What Fred Brooks just said there, that yeah, it holds more than 1 decade, and it will even hold more than that. And I guess there would not be any change that changes things drastically in a way that people will just drop anything else and try to and start writing code in the new environment, because there will not be any single new environment that is much more efficient than any other that we have today. And again, the reason is that the business logic, the actual essence of what we write is the complicated part. So then the question is, okay, but can we still have changes, improvements in languages? Yes, we can, but it will change things. It may make things more easier to write, but it would not be a big change. So this is the claim, and in a way, it is still true. But there can still be bad choices. So even if you say, okay, there is no silver bullet, there are many bullets that would not hit at all. So what should we avoid? Well, taking again the metaphor of the ice cream, we should not take a technology that is still experimental or not well accepted. So if you are hearing about something new and you want to test it, that's nice. But if nobody is talking about it, don't rush and put your $10 million project on that. We would not like to go through a technology that doesn't fit the target domain. And we'll talk about target domains. Or a technology that requires expertise that is not accessible, either in the company or we cannot get candidates for this technology. And we have to consider the entire life cycle of including maintenance and support, because in many cases, there is a programmer who read about Julia and says, I want to do something with Julia. It's a great software programming language. And he is the only one in the company who learned about it. And then he writes something and goes on to another company to write Julia there. And now we have a new project which nobody knows how to maintain, or you have to train people how to maintain it. And you would not like to take a technology that doesn't have any advantage over existing technologies, because if you take something new, there is the closest rule. If you take something new inside, you should throw something out. So if currently your company has 200 people and you are writing in 5 languages, 5 different programming languages, you want to bring something new, think about what does it replace, what I would throw away. Because if you do not do that, it means that you have too many luggage to maintain. And it doesn't have to be immediately, but you have to create some kind of a track of replacement. This is a non-exhausting list of domains. And each domain, in a way, needs its own thinking, its own picking of a language. Now, why is the reason that different domains need different languages? Because the language itself tries to capture the requirements of the domain. A domain that requires direct memory access will need languages that allow direct memory access. A domain that is more focused on user experience would need a language that is relevant for user experience, and so on. So there is a reason that different languages behave differently or focus on different things, and the selection is domain specific. For example, if we are programming for the web, so we will have a web front-end tier and a web server-side tier, and we'll just select the proper technology or the proper programming language for each tier. It might be the same. For example, if we pick JavaScript, we have a JavaScript possibility for both sides, or Kotlin, or C# with Blazor. But it might be another language for the web front end and the web server side. If you go for data analysis, we can go with Python or R or MATLAB. And other languages also try to, in a way, solve things in the data analysis domain, but they are less acceptable in this domain. So you have to think, would I find proper libraries, examples? When I'm stuck, can I find answers in Stack Overflow for the specific domain that I'm using the language for? For backend, we have its own list. For low level, we'd have the list of proper languages there. Let's focus on a few. Let's talk about Python, Java, Kotlin, Groovy, C++, Rust, and Go. And why did I pick those? Either they are quite popular or quite popular as languages that people are considering now. Python is a jack of all trades, and in this particular case, a master of many. It is easy to use, popular, very coherent in the sense that things work in Python the same for different parts of the language. If there is a rule, everything is aligned to this rule. It has many relevant libraries in many domains, and it added relevant things in the past few years, like type hints. It's today still a dynamic language, dynamically typed language, but you can say, and you should say, what are the types that you want to get as a parameter, and what is the type that you return. And then your program is more documented, and Pylint can check that people are calling your function properly. And these are things that are added in the past years and are used. There is async IO libraries and abilities in the language, and the language is going forward. It can be compiled. People in some cases treat Python as it is a scripting language, which means it is slow. So in many cases, it is not slow because you're using external libraries, which eventually are implemented based on C, like NumPy and TensorFlow and many others. But even your own code can be compiled and earn significant performance boost. It can even run in the browser. Probably it would not be your choice for the browser because it's not well accepted yet. It might be as time passes, but there are projects which brings Python even to the browser. Let's talk a bit about Java. Java is statically typed, object-oriented, portable, high performance. It's one of the most rich programming languages in terms of supporting ecosystem, libraries, infrastructure, and supporting tools. It is losing market share to Python, to Node.js, Go, and others, but it is here to stay. There is a huge code base for Java, and many projects and new projects are written in Java. And there is no real reason to abandon Java. It is vastly used today with Spring Framework, and it is now, these days, vastly used with streams, like, for example, in this code, Kafka with streams. And when we are working with Java and streams, our code becomes, in a way, more declarative. Declarative means that we say what we want and not how we want to do that. You can say in the chat which language is very well known to be a declarative language. Well, the most known declarative language is SQL. SQL is the most known declarative language. You say what you want and not how you want to achieve that. Kotlin is also very hot. Kotlin was announced by Google to be its preferred language for Android. Kotlin is multi-platform for mobile, also for iOS. It can be compiled as native, or it can run over JVM. It has many interesting features, which makes your code easier to write, easier to maintain. It has coroutines, and it is a language worth checking. Groovy was a great promise. Groovy is also a JVM-based language. And again, you can also use it as a scripting language. But in a way, it is losing its popularity because I think other languages are taking its share. like Kotlin. Groovy came out before Kotlin, and Kotlin in a way took its share, and Go and other languages which at the end are driving Groovy a bit aside, but still Groovy is relevant for Jenkins pipelines and other usages, but probably not for generic scripting or backend. C++ is still there and would be still there for probably decades ahead. Is the language where you can do anything close to the metal, and you pay only for what you need. So I would not talk about C++ too much, but I want to talk about Rust and Go. Rust is a big promise. Rust is a new philosophy of let's be as efficient as C++, allowing you to write things like with C++, but with memory safety and concurrency safety. And Rust is doing that quite well. But the problem is, at the end, is that Rust is a bit complicated. The language itself is very nice. You can do things in like in this slide, a single very basic things like factorial are 3 examples from Wikipedia. But when you want to say something like, okay, I'm sending you reference and I want to get back the reference, it becomes quite cumbersome. And you will get compilation errors till you get it right. And this is the reason why companies are considering Rust, and then they are reconsidering. And it is a question whether the additional safety worth the hassle of a cumbersome or a more cumbersome language with additional compilation errors for things that you need out to do or to say right in your code. Microsoft, for example, is considering Rust, and here are 2 quotes. One is saying, yes, we are going to Rust, and the other one from Microsoft is saying, no, we are remaining with C++. And there are good things and bad things with Rust, and the main obstacle is the steep learning curve. Go is also a big promise, and don't confuse it with another language called Go exclamation mark. I'm not kidding. There are 2 languages. The names are getting a bit exhausted. It is compiled to a native executable. There is no runtime that you have to go with. It is an executable at the end, but with a garbage collector. While Rust is without garbage collector, as C++ is, Go goes with a garbage collector. Performance and scale in mind. So it is very efficient, but if you need something which with a deterministic runtime, might be that Go is not your choice. I would not have time to go through the code, but for example, one interesting feature is Go doesn't have inheritance. You go with duck typing interface. So this slide shows that. And there is Go routines, which are lightweight threading mechanism, very useful and very nice. Some additional links for comparing between languages. And let's take a look at your poll results. You just have to tell me in the chat if you see this slide. Do you see the poll results? Yes. Okay. So we have many people are using Python, C++. We have 1 person in the sample using Go, 1 person using Rust. And when you go for what are you considering, I see that many people are considering Rust. There are a few considering Go also. And there are many who are not considering anything else than what they are using currently. So, to conclude, if you have any questions, it was a bit speedy, but I think the microphone can be turned on, or you can ask in the chat. So if there are no questions, thank you very much all.